Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad you can join us. We'll have several more people joining us pretty soon. This is Robert Brown, and on behalf of the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, we're excited to have you join us for our first session of KVEC's fifth National Micro-Credential Summit. And our past summits have been very successful due to the continued conversations among states and organizations about the positive impact personalized professional learning, which includes micro-credentials, has on educator and student success. And right now, to welcome all of you guys to our session, if you would in the chat box, just kind of drop where you are coming from, your organization, and so we can get a feel for who's on right now. That would be great. Okay, it's going pretty fast. Okay, wow. I see folks from other parts of the nation, Iowa, Wyoming, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Fallsburg, NEA and DC, KDE, Georgetown College, Pikeville, KVEC folks, local, Leslie, North Carolina. So we have a good wide range of folks coming on. Many of the conversations that we've had from our past summits have continued through some podcasting. We've had many follow-up conversations with many of you over the year. And because of that combined effort, micro-credentialing has earned a place as an important instructional tool for educators and students through the entire PK through university system. It's even extended beyond to recertification and teacher leadership classifications. And we know that micro-credentials are part of a system of professional learning for educators. So our focus for these sessions this year are innovation, partnerships, and possibilities. So in addition to micro-credentials, we know that coaching, mentoring, reflective practices, networking, and technology resources are all components of an effective system. And so this will lead our conversation for today. So Jennifer Carroll, who's KVEC's professional learning lead and who works extensively in creating micro-credentials, will review some general housekeeping rules for us and then introduce and then drop into the chat box some links to multiple resources concerning micro-credentials. And we are very excited today to have our special presenter, which is the head of teaching and learning with the Modern Classrooms Project, which is Kate Gaskell. And we have been working on a partnership with them, and it's been very exciting to have them here. Also moderating today are two of our innovation leads here at KVEC. Our associate director is Desi Bowling, and then our innovation grants coordinator, Bernadette Carpenter. So we look forward to this conversation that we're getting ready to have. And so Jennifer, I'm gonna turn this over to you.
Thank you, Robert. So today I will be serving sort of as a Zoom facilitator for our session. As some reminders, just be sure that you have your mic muted. You can do that in two places. You can do that at the bottom of the screen in your toolbar. There is a microphone icon, and then also if you're in the gallery view, you can hover over your picture and a blue box will appear that says mute and unmute. So make sure that you have your mic muted just so that we can keep the background noise down. We hope that you will leave your video on if that is feasible. It helps the presenters to be able to see the faces of those folks that they're talking to. We do understand if bandwidth is an issue, but remember to use the chat as our back channel. We will be using the chat as the back channel. I, along with other members of our KVEC staff, will be monitoring the chat. If a question is dropped in the chat box that can be answered directly, we will just drop the reply in the chat box. But if those questions require input and discussion from our facilitators or our presenters, then we will pause at natural transitions between slides to address those questions directly. Also, during the session, resources and links that are aligned to the presentation will be shared within the chat box. When the session is archived, direct links will be archived alongside of those. Initial documents will also be shared in the chat box that are contextual resources just to provide some background and help frame KVEC's work around the development, implementation, and assessment of micro-credentials for educator professional learning. We will also share links to our existing micro-credentials that are being offered on the Digital Promise micro-credential platform. We have more of those that are coming as well, so we encourage you to check back for some more of those that are getting ready to be released. Earners of KVEC micro-credentials include educators from more than 16 states. So with that, I'm going to introduce our co-facilitators for today. Dr. Desi Bowling, who is our Associate Director of the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, you probably know her because she is recognized internationally for her work positively impacting rural schools, career and technical education, equity, and other areas that are so critical to student success. And then also we have Bernadette Carpenter. She is our former school and district administrator and is the innovation lead for the Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. She has tirelessly facilitated 7 rounds of innovation grants across our region that have gained national and international recognition for the clinical practices that have advanced educator professional practice and student outcomes. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Dr. Bowling and Bernadette Carpenter. And as I have said, and just a reminder, we will utilize the chat as our back channel. So if you need anything during the session, be sure to drop it in the chat box. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert and Jennifer. And Bernadette and I are excited to facilitate this session of the Micro-Credential Summit because we get to introduce our audience to the Modern Classroom Project. And then we get to share a little bit about our partnership and what we're doing with some of the educators in our region. But first, you may not know too much about KVEC, so we wanted to share with you a little bit about KVEC and where we are. So we want you to know that we are an educational support agency. We have 25 member districts, and we haven't updated this slide, but we just had 2 new members to join earlier in the month of May. And we are located, as you can see on the slide, we're located in far eastern Kentucky. We border West Virginia, Ohio, and Tennessee, and all of these are very rural areas. Now, when most people think about Kentucky, they think about bluegrass, and because we just had the Kentucky Derby, people think about that as well. But you won't find those 2 things here in our region, but what you will find, you'll see beautiful mountains, you'll see wide open spaces, and you'll find good people focused on providing educational opportunities so that students can be successful post-secondary. KVEC was created over 50 years ago when 8 small school districts came together to form a partnership when they learned that they could provide resources and opportunities for students and staff, and they learned that they could provide more opportunities for students and staff by working together instead of working independently because of the isolation and scale in our region. Now, about 8 years ago, we were very blessed to receive a Race to the Top grant. Now, we'd been doing the work you see on your slide right now on a smaller scale, but the funding through the Race to the Top allowed us to make stronger partnerships and more of a sustainable investment with our teachers and our students. Now, we put systems in place to do the work you see here, including micro-credential development, and we put that all in place to make people better through innovation in systems design, resource use, and human capital development. And when we first heard about modern classrooms and we talked with Kate about the project, we saw the connection between the systems approach to professional learning at KVEC and the exciting work taking place through the Modern Classrooms project. And what it is, if you see that on your screen, by changing the way teachers teach, we help all students learn. And so that's what it's all about. It's about working together to find solutions so that the entire school community become leaders, learners, and makers, and then bringing those people together to celebrate the good work taking place in classrooms across our region. Now, Bernadette's going to tell you more about how we celebrate learning at our Fire Summits, and she's going to share a brief video with you.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. If anyone's ever attended our Fire Summits, I think you're going to remember them.
So sorry, I can never remember that unmute button. So I'll start again. It's great to be here. Wonderful to see some faces that I recognize and see the new faces. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our Fire Summits. As Jennifer said, we've had 7 rounds of innovation grants. And that means we've had 14 Fire Summits. And the FIRE stands for Forging Innovation in Rural Education. And if you've ever been to one, or ever watched one virtually, it's an overwhelming feeling. It's just a wonderful, wonderful day of watching our teachers and students celebrate and share the successes and sometimes the failures, what didn't work, with others in our region, our state, and beyond. So the summit presentations are housed on theholler.org, and Jennifer has dropped that link in the chat box. So I would really encourage you to, if you haven't seen those, because they're housed all the way back 7 years ago, I would encourage you to watch those, and you'll see so much growth. Our teachers are just amazing, and our administrators in our region. Now, the clip that we're sharing is from our spring virtual Fire Summit that we just had April 20th. It was amazing. Sometimes I just think it can't get any better, and it does get better every time. This is a presentation from a teacher that has had multiple grants throughout the last 7 years. And this clip is just an example of how knowledge base and skills are developed by using innovative practices. And that's what our teachers have been stepping out and doing for the past 7 years. And I'm sure they did it before, but now we're showcasing it and pushing it along. When you see the little video clip that we're doing on the acknowledgement slide, you'll see how it demonstrates how student-initiated partnerships have been formed across multi-state levels. And that happens when teachers give students the opportunities and the ability to know how to step out and do that. So we're just so proud of that. Now, students benefit from an innovative teacher, and we all know that. And I think that over the years, we've seen it more and more folks are stepping out. And we're at that point where we do offer micro-credentials, and we know that when teachers go through that micro-credential process, that they learn the skills that need to be implemented to create innovation. So when you watch this clip, I really think you're going to be, well, I know you're going to be very impressed, because I've watched these videos several times and I never get tired of watching them. So I'm going to let you watch the clip and enjoy.
Just a moment, we're working on the sound.
Okay, we got a little technical difficulty. I'm sure it's really nothing, but we'll come back to that and we'll share that with you later on. Jennifer will be dropping the link in the chat box so you can actually view it yourself. Sorry.
Well, now technology is great when it works and can have a little bit of an issue when it won't work. But so now that you have learned a little bit more about KVEC and the work that we do to improve teaching and learning, we are excited to welcome Kate. And we want to hear all about the great work that they're doing to improve teaching and learning as well. So Kate, can you tell us a little bit more about Modern Classroom projects and how the system in place leads to innovation for schools, for teachers, and for students?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, let me just thank KVEC, everyone, for joining us today. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here and talk about the partnership that the Modern Classrooms Project was fortunate enough to pursue with KVEC this past spring. You know, innovation is so central to everything we do with the Modern Classrooms Project, but focusing on the individual classroom. We believe it's when you focus on an individual teacher, empower that teacher, we can transform student learning. So you're going to hear a little bit about our organization as well as really the instructional model itself. So we are a nonprofit organization, and really we seek to build classrooms that respond to every student's need. When we ourselves were teachers, we served in a Title I high poverty environment. And we found that, you know, as I'm going to go through, we had kids we felt were, you know, quote unquote, slipping through the cracks. So it was through our experience as educators that we kind of codified what we were doing in our rooms. And now we're really proud to share what we do with blended, self-paced, and mastery-based instruction. We're proud to bring that to other educators, you know, in hopes that they can, you know, foster a stronger human connection in their class, you know, really authentic learning. We want our students to walk out of our classrooms prepared and feeling loved every day. I myself am a proud former high school social studies teacher, and you're actually going to visit my classroom through a video in a little bit. But I think I taught in Washington, D.C. I was a rural student. I was a rural K-12 student myself. And then I went to teach in an urban environment. Now, I think whether it's my experience in a city or my mother's experience teaching 41 years in a rural Title I school, I think that what we're going to go through about traditional models of teaching, I think this will resonate sadly with a lot of us. So I often found that I was one teacher. I would stand in front of my group of, let's say, 25 learners, and I looked out on a diverse body of students. You know, I had my students who they were there every day. When we tested them, when we gave them SRI tests, being a history teacher, that was really the metric that I cared about, was their reading levels. You know, they were tested on grade level, even above grade level. And the work was often too easy for them. And I struggled to find engaging material for them at the same time. You know, I was facilitating a classroom for my students who were absent. Teaching at a Title I school, I did have a below average in-seat attendance. And oftentimes I think that those of us who have served students who come from vulnerable situations, we know that when they miss school, this can create a really vicious cycle. They fall further behind. They feel more disengaged. They stop coming to school. They fall further behind, feel more disengaged. And then I also had my students who, when we gave them that SRI, when the math teachers gave them their MAP assessment, they were behind. They were missing some pretty critical foundational skills. You know, they were behind in math, behind in reading, and they were often lost. And here I sat, you know, as this high school history teacher, lexiles ranging from 600 to 1200 in one room, feeling like a failure. A lot of times, feeling like I'm not only meeting everyone's academic needs, I'm not meeting their social emotional needs. And I got into teaching because I love young people and I want to give them everything they need for a fair shot in this world. So I was very fortunate because some other educators at my school who actually went on to found the Modern Classrooms Project we're innovating, tinkering, thinking as great teachers do. And we were thinking, what can we do so we don't leave our kids behind? And we came up with this instructional model. Now, we'll kind of, I like to say, like, demystifying the buzzwords here. I think, after the year that it has been with COVID-19, I think we're all a little bit more familiar with blended instruction. Essentially, responsibly leveraging ed technology. For us, that's where we start with our instructional model. What that means for us is we ourselves, the teacher, we create instructional videos, very short, objective-driven videos that our students can access in class, out of class. They can pause and rewind us. And because we've cloned ourselves on video, as you're going to hear me saying in a little bit, this now frees me, the teacher, up to work with students one-on-one and in small groups. And it also then empowers my students to be able to work on different lessons within the same unit. I can have one student on lesson 1, getting a little more time, watching the video again, maybe working with me one-on-one on some parts of this lesson, while my student over here can fly. They're on lesson 4. All right. Now, when we can self-pace, we can then start holding our kids to mastery. We don't have to push everyone on to a new lesson just because it's a new day. We can now say, no, we're going to hit the pause button on this student here. He can have a little bit more time with lesson 1 because I think he can get it. Just after some revising, after working with me, maybe it's reading the notes over again or watching a video, he can get there. And now he gets the time and space he needs to revise again, while his other peers can go on. So I think the very best way to understand what we were doing in our classrooms is to see it. So I'm going to show a video was created by Edutopia. They came with a great film crew. The kids had a lot of fun. And if I can just get a thumbs up that my sound is working, and we'll go from there.
Hi, Angel. How are you? Good. Nice job, Mr. 6.10.
So one of the toughest challenges students face when they walk into classrooms is they feel tense. They're worried about being put on the spot, especially if they're behind or don't understand the skill. When they come into our classrooms, they know they're picking up where they left off. We're seeing students' anxiety levels drop and their commitment and desire to master content increase.
So I want to shout out Nathaniel and Will. They came on their own time. They got some videos going and they are ahead of pace.
Eastern High School is located in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Being 100% free and reduced lunch, our students come to us with varied levels of academic performance.
When I came to Eastern, I was sort of shocked with how broad the variety of learning levels was. We have students who have experienced a ton of trauma, who are behind on certain skill sets, are ahead in certain skill sets, have different subsets of experience when they go home. I quickly found out that my traditional model of teaching was not actually effective. So at that time, I realized I needed to make a shift, and I wanted to start by getting rid of the lecture at the beginning of my class. I'm gonna get started today with a revision. So Santana and Jamie, just see me in the back real quick. The instructional model that I started implementing, there are 3 components: blended learning, self-paced structure, and mastery-based grading. What you would see today is really a controlled chaos environment. You have some students starting a new lesson, watching an instructional video, taking their guided notes. You have other kids working on actual lesson assignments, collaborating on whiteboards, really problem solving. And then you'll see other students working on exit tickets to achieve mastery.
I like what's the first class because it teaches you independence. For every lesson, we start off with a video, and then during the video, we have to take notes. Mr. Farah, he does the videos himself. You'll hear his voice every time you watch a video.
In today's lesson, we're going to focus on finding our local maxes and mins.
I love it, actually. You get to pause it, stop, and then go back and be able to rewatch the lesson over again until I fully understand and grasp the strategies and formulas.
Once they're done watching that instructional video, they transition to some type of assignment or activity.
That's it for A, right? And then we already found the derivative. And now say find the rate of change in the weight of the oil.
Everyone learns different. So you may be on lesson 5, someone may be on 3. It all depends on how you work. It's better than in a regular class where everybody has to stay on the same thing. The students help each other. So if you ahead, you might can help someone that's behind.
Oh, okay, so after you get that over 4, you gotta divide the whole thing by 4. Okay. All right.
After that, there's an exit ticket.
So an exit ticket is like a mini quiz. It's just a couple questions at the end of the lesson that really succinctly measure the student's ability to execute the activities they learned. So when a student has mastered an exit ticket, they move forward. When they don't, they have a reteach. You're assuming that your Y is 0. And then they try a new exit ticket until they've achieved mastery.
Showtime. Did you get your exit ticket right? Well, your derivative is spot on.
So because I am not delivering a lecture, I'm now free to work with students for the entirety of the class period.
X equals 4.
Yes. Woo.
Real quick, just remind me, what do you have to argue? Who is more responsible for perpetuating the Cold War? I'm gonna meet with a few people on topic sentences first.
The video instruction makes me feel like I've been able to clone myself instead of needing to explain a concept and then re-explain the concept and then say it again. I'm giving the instruction on the video, which frees me up to work one-on-one or in small groups. Does your topic sentence directly answer the essay question? No, it doesn't.
I like it a lot. I never feel like I'm being rushed or feel like, oh, I already know this. Like, why am I going over this again? I always feel like I'm being challenged.
I have a really accurate pulse check of where my students are. So-and-so is on 6.9 and they're about halfway through because I haven't seen an exit ticket yet. Whereas another student has advanced to 6.10 and I can even lean on that student to explain something to their peers.
Okay, so you're only going to use 2 quote explication charts. Your 2 strongest ones.
I think it helps with your time management. A couple days ago, I had to stay after school to get my work done because I was slacking a little bit. Like when you miss a class, you can watch the video at home to catch up.
Part of the reason this format works so well is we have a lower than average in-seat attendance rate. In a traditional format, once the teacher delivers that lesson, they're moving on to the next lesson the next day, and they don't get an opportunity to go back over it.
I've had students who, sadly, in a traditional classroom, they simply would have failed the quarter due to their number of absences for legitimate reasons and often sometimes really heartbreaking reasons. With this way of teaching, that student can come really with more of a fighting chance and ultimately pass a quarter.
In our model, if a student is experiencing distress and needs emotional support, it doesn't disrupt the larger classroom environment. I'm able to pivot and work with that student, discuss what's going on, while the other students are able to access the content and flourish.
You have to do 10, then put parentheses in the calculator too. I did. Oh, you got it. It's supposed to be a positive, girl.
Thank you for coming back to Eastern High School with me. There will never be a day that I don't watch that video and get a little sad because I miss them. Let's just dive in, take a little bit closer look at these 3 pillars of this instructional model before we kind of talk about some of the questions as well as, just our work with teachers. So when we talk about blended instruction, one thing I think that's important to clarify is that our educators eliminate whole class direct instruction, most of it. There's always going to be those times where we just want to gather the class and teach something again, just real quick, hey, everybody. But for the most part, we are shifting those moments again where I want to clone myself to video. That doesn't mean that we eliminate whole class activities. John Dewey would not like that. That's not school. We need labs, we need seminars, we need case studies, we need debates, and we absolutely still have those as part of our classroom, just in a self-paced environment. It just requires unique planning. And we do cover that in our professional developments, but I think it's an important clarification to make. Just emphasizing again that our teachers develop their own instructional videos. We love teachers. We trust teachers. There's power in teacher authenticity. Our educators, whether they are in Eastern Kentucky or Washington, D.C., they've spent years working and refining their craft. They know how they want to explain fractions to their 4th graders. They want to be able to reference things from the community or the classroom. So it's not, it's important to just emphasize that the instructors, the teachers themselves, we empower them to be innovators to create their own instructional videos. So it's not like they are, buying an ed tech program that perhaps, this is a preset curriculum, that with, instead we train the teachers with research-based strategies, how to make their own instructional videos to meet their students' needs. Now, self-pacing. So in our classrooms, the use of videos, it allows our students to self-pace. But I think it's important to point out that our students self-pace within a unit of study. Now, that's done for many reasons. One is just these are age-appropriate guardrails, okay? And we still, it'd be very difficult to tell a 10th grader, all right, here's the curriculum, go. No. We absolutely have deadlines. Deadlines are a part of life. The unit will close on this date, and we're going to do the great things, the great interventions that teachers are doing to encourage our students to meet those unit deadlines. But we self-pace within that unit because we do want a chance for this, again, to be a collaborative learning experience. We want to come together at the end of the unit for a writer's workshop activity, or we want to come together mid-unit for a lab. So we all need to be on the same unit of study. So our kids are self-paced within that unit. Now, I think every great educator is thinking, okay, Kate, but learners are really diverse, like you said. So how do we keep kids on the same unit? And this is where we really kind of like to put our differentiation in action. And we have our professional development talks about must do, should do, and aspire to do aspects of a unit. So these might be lessons themselves, where our must do is the very critical content, should do, we're ramping up the rigor, and perhaps an aspire to do is some sort of ongoing project. That could be one example. Perhaps these are individual tasks within a lesson themselves. Perhaps it's the number of practice problems, that in a math lesson that differentiate between a should do and a must do. Our educators get very creative. We have educators in North Carolina to reflect just the heritage of where they live. They talk about it in terms of start your engines is a must do, rev your engines is a should do, take a victory lap is an aspire to do. So our teachers by no means are married to the names, but it's just important that our students are always engaged with content that's appropriate for them and where they are in that moment. So our teachers track students' progress. They monitor progress closely throughout a unit using a few different tools. We've got two on the screen. This is actually at the bottom here is a public pacing tracker. Some of our teachers opt to, you can see kind of through the color, they communicate what lesson a student is on, where that is relative to the pace or target lesson for that day. It's an easy way to communicate revisions. It kind of normalizes revisions. We see multiple students have to revise. It's a part of life. And it's also a nice tool for collaboration and motivation. Students can look up, see where a friend is and say, I think we can go through these practice problems together, for example. Now, in the upper right-hand corner is what we call a student-facing game board. So this is seen in an elementary school in Pennsylvania. This teacher created just a game-style way for her students to track their progress through a particular unit. This is something each student has their own copy, and it's the kind of building those self-regulation, executive functioning skills in young learners. So like you heard in that video, when we talk about mastery-based grading, we really want our students to take these bite-sized assessments. We called them exit tickets in the video. This is a way, I kind of like to think of them as pulse checks. I'm taking a pulse. Where is this learner? Do I feel confident that they have mastered this objective in X lesson? Yes, great. They can go on. No, we're not quite there. That's okay. We have the structures in place where now we can revise, we can even reassess by offering them a different mastery check if appropriate, and just kind of asking our students to reflect. So no more are we moving kids along just based on completion or compliance or because it's a new day. We need to see that their progress is contingent on mastery. So I'd love to stop and answer any questions at this point, kind of about what we're doing in classrooms and what the instructional model looks like.
Okay, we do have a question in the chat box, and it comes from Jason Love Turner. And he's asking about what are your thoughts on first-year teachers or inexperienced, newerish teachers making those videos?
I think it's a really good question, Jason. I actually teach a class at George Washington University of pre-service social studies teachers. And I will say that although the technical aspect, a first-year teacher can very easily manage creating an instructional video. We often see the process go easier for educators who deeply understand their curriculum and understand backwards planning. So when the educator really understands, okay, let's just use the example that we had, my Cold War unit. I've taught this before. It has 12 lessons. Here are the objectives for each of these lessons. I know that mastery on each of these lessons looks like, X, Y, Z. That teacher is going to have a little bit of an easier time than creating an instructional video because that planning piece, I think, is done. Now, I think if you have a very hardworking first-year teacher, an ambitious first-year teacher who's comfortable with that, who just shows an aptitude with they're a good planner, I think they can do it. I really do. I think it's just because I've seen my grad students be able to do it, my pre-service teachers. But I think that the first-year teacher just has a little bit more work to do because they're probably not going to have the years of experience in that prep. They're not going to have the unit plan, likely to take out. But the tech aspect, they can absolutely do it. And if they're willing to put the work in that first year, they're set up well for the future years. It's a good question.
Thank you, Kate. That was a great response too. And I just wanted to note that there was a shout out too from Dr. Robin Hayden about that student facing game board like tracker.
Yeah.
And how much kids would enjoy that and would be a great communication tool between teachers and students and parents. So
yeah, I will grab for Dr. Hayden, I'm gonna grab a quick link that I think I've got. That's not our only game board. I'll pull that up real fast. We get a lot of our students do really like those student facing progress trackers. So I'll put a link in the chat.
So see, it pays to put things in the chat box. You get presents.
Absolutely.
So we did have another question, and it was about looking at the schools located in rural, remote areas with high poverty rates. And sometimes those schools have difficulty providing high quality personalized learning experiences for teachers and for students due to scale and isolation. So how well does the process implemented by the Modern Classroom projects fit for students in rural, remote areas with high poverty rates?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good question. We know that students from rural areas, again, I was one of those students myself growing up, and students from high poverty areas, these are groups with unique needs. We developed this instructional model again in a setting that served many students who 100% of our students qualified for free and reduced lunch. So we saw some of the unique challenges that come with working with students who are living in poverty. One of those is attendance. We had kids, and I think many of us on the call can remember kids who we've had miss school to take care of younger siblings while parents are working, who have played who've played a large role in the family, sometimes even working themselves. We're seeing that right now with our educators who are implementing during COVID-19. We hear of a lot more students going to work, even full-time, to support their families. So what we see, I think, is that, like we talked about in the video a little bit, this gives our students who are missing school a chance to catch up, opportunities to stay engaged. They can still be part of this rather than missing school, going through a lot of the social emotional aspects of why they missed school, feeling distracted. This allows them to pause, rewind their teacher in class, out of class. It keeps them in the game. So I like to say. Another thing I think that this can really help students who are living in poverty, who are, living with family situations of lower socioeconomic status, is that as you saw in the video, it allowed, you saw me, I was working one-on-one and in small groups with students. So often many of our kids in poverty come to us with some gaps. And this being able to work with kids one-on-one and in small groups, we could finally start to address some of those. And I think also message, I care about you too much to move the class on, even though I know that you don't get it, and we're never going to talk about this again. And we're just gonna hope that you do the best you can. This way, I think that students really saw very seen when we did. Essentially, it's like their education could be paused until we could get this and we could work with it. And I think, there was a confidence and a trust built there. Not to mention just the amount of time we got to spend with them. When you can spend time with someone one-on-one or in a small group, it's a different relationship you form than if you're one teacher in front of the class of 25. So I think that sometimes with some of our kids who had more vulnerable backgrounds, that the relationships that we were able to build is critical. I think for, rural schools, rural schools have their own challenges. I think one of them being that rural districts are sometimes limited in the course offerings that they can provide. And teachers, we talked about teacher professional development is sometimes limited. And we know that ambitious teachers live in rural areas. These are not just confined in urban areas. So I think that what the Modern Classrooms Project does is for educators, our mentorship program, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is all virtual. It's very possible to do that from anywhere in the world. And we do have educators from all over the world enrolled. But for students individually, I think, for the schools that can't offer, let's say it's some of these advanced courses, International Baccalaureate or, AP Econ, some of these classes that just are not commonly offered in a rural setting, we can take our kids, some of our advanced learners, and then they can be pushed through those aspire to do activities. We can have students who can excel in a course, they can move through that faster, they can go deeper, they can gain a more broad knowledge of something than they necessarily could in a traditional environment. I also think that staffing can be tough in rural districts. And in a pinch, what this can do is you can offer, if you can't fill, let's say, an Algebra 2 position, but you have a modern classroom teacher in a neighboring district or even next door, maybe it's even just a vacancy in that building, who's built a curriculum, who's built a modern classrooms course for Algebra 2. If we have devices, then we can mitigate. We have that teacher's lessons that we can use just, as a stopgap measure until we can fill this position, and kids aren't necessarily, they're not incurring the learning losses that they would otherwise. I think that those are two unique elements that we can bring to rural districts specifically.
Kate, this question kind of goes along with what you were just talking about. We have a question from Bobette Ray from the Arkansas Department of Education, who's asking about your school, Eastern High School. And at this point, do all teachers use the Modern Classrooms model there, or are there other schools where you know of where it's an entire school model where the teachers are sharing videos as content teams, or that kind of model?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I can't think of a school where every teacher, is using the Modern Classrooms instructional model, and I'm okay with that. I firmly believe that teachers are the experts of their craft, and if a teacher wants to opt in, we want to work with them. But I also understand if someone says, it's not for me, I wouldn't want to force that on a teacher. We do see, what's fun is our teachers are our best ambassadors. So we do see it spreading, once one teacher does it in a school or a content team,
we do tend to see more and more and more and more. There are several modern classrooms teachers at Eastern. I'm thinking of the game board that Dr. Hayden said that she appreciated. That comes from a rural district actually in Pennsylvania, where the entire 4th grade team collaborates on, and they do the same thing. They divide and conquer. One teacher does this unit of slides for the videos, the other teacher designs the next, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really nice. And they know, this is Ms. Dixon's voice, this is Ms. Fisher, and this is Ms. Feister. So it works. I love it when we see it on Teams. I was very fortunate at Eastern because my department mate, we were able to divide, conquer, share, and our students were better for it.
Thank you very much. And I'll continue to monitor the chat box if there are other questions that arise during the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
So I am happy to talk a little bit more about how we work with teachers, unless there was another question. Oh, Bernadette, I think you're on mute.
You'd think I'd finally get that, wouldn't you? There was another question about what micro-credentials that Modern Classroom used and how those were used within your system of professional learning.
Yeah. So that's a great question, and why we're here today to talk about how micro-credentials are one of the tools in an expansive tool belt that we can use to provide ongoing professional development for our teachers. And we do that at the Modern Classrooms Project. Really, we do it through our virtual mentorship is the best way that teachers are equipped to achieve micro-credentials. So again, we believe when we can reshape the teacher experience, we can reshape the student experience. And there are 2 primary ways we work with educators. One is our free course. We're a nonprofit organization, learn.modernclassrooms.org, that will always be there, and it's a great place to learn the basics of our model. The virtual mentorship program, I'm very proud of this, because not only at the end of the virtual mentorship program are teachers equipped to apply for the Digital Promise micro-credentials we offer. I believe teachers learn best from other teachers, and I think, and it provides them mentorship and a collaborative, a thought partner, really, someone that they can be designing their own modern classroom while getting the guidance from another educator who has done this successfully in their classroom. So what this looks like is our virtual mentorship program. We have an online component of the course, so teachers log in. They see examples, they kind of learn best practices, short tutorials on what we're looking for when we talk about mastery-based learning. We're talking about these instructional videos. And after each module of the course, educators design a submission that they will use in their classroom. They submit that to their teacher mentor for their teacher mentor's feedback and coaching. And at the end of this, at the end of the virtual mentorship program, our educators will walk away with multiple lessons that are classroom ready. Again, having gotten that one-on-one mentor feedback. And then they're well set up to apply for our Digital Promise micro-credentials. So we offer 2 specifically. One can really be done right after the virtual mentorship program, using a lot of the submissions that they got mentor feedback on. That's the Planning for Modern Classroom Instruction micro-credential. Essentially, it is, again, emphasizing the importance of planning backwards, reflecting, and thinking ahead to implementation. After a few months of doing this in their classroom, we encourage educators to apply for that second micro-credential, implementing modern classroom instruction. So this is where, and that's the one I'm actually going to walk through, where they're not only taking the items that they designed in the virtual mentorship program, again, that they got mentor feedback on. It's rich with reflection and evidence from what they're seeing with their students.
Another thing that's very interesting about this, we've been around now long enough where we're starting to see former mentees in our virtual mentorship program go on to be our mentors. And you're going to hear from a few of those teachers here in a minute, all of course who achieved the Digital Promise Micro-Credential and then went on to apply to be a Modern Classroom mentor. So when you go to, and I think that link, we can put that in the chat, but this is the second micro-credential we offer through Digital Promise, implementing modern classroom instruction. And this is so fun for us to review, I have to say, because it's the closest we've gotten to classroom visits during COVID-19. It's like, it's a digital portfolio of just outstanding blended self-paced mastery-based learning from all over the country. So, you know, we start by the educator providing context about their classroom, their career in education, and why they chose to adopt modern classroom practices in their course, in their classes. And then, of course, we want our teachers to submit, we want to see examples, documents from their classroom, as well as their reflection on how these individual pieces of the instructional model, are going. So we start, of course, with blended learning. We ask to see a couple of the instructional videos along with evidence that students are engaged. Those can be student notes, and teachers will upload, describe these examples, along with a demonstration of walking through their learning management system. So their Canvas, their Google Classroom, we want this great content that the teacher builds to be accessible to students. So that is another component. Then we ask our teachers to submit a portion on self-paced structures. So we want to see, how are you monitoring student progress? Is collaboration still a part of your classroom? And how does this look in a self-paced learning environment? How are you motivating your students? Self-pacing can bring a lot of freedom and independence, and we have to do this in age-appropriate ways. How do you motivate learners in your room? And then finally, mastery-based grading. So we ask our educators to submit documentation on work samples. And so those could very easily are mastery checks that students have completed. It's great if we can, see one that students maybe needed to revise, and one where a student did achieve mastery, as well as the practice that got the student there. How did they develop it? And then how did they demonstrate it? Then, of course, we want to see how that educator is fostering a culture of revision and reflection in their classroom as well. The final part of the Digital Promise, implementing a modern classroom instruction micro-credential, is finally just that reflection piece. It's very powerful when educators get to sit back and really think and reflect on their instruction. And we're very proud that this is an opportunity for them to do that. So our educators, micro-credential is one way they stay connected with us. We are a growing movement. We host monthly webinars, record a weekly podcast, and have, vibrant social media presence, including a pretty active Facebook teacher discussion group where our teachers just kind of really go and talk the nitty-gritty of their units or their self-paced classrooms. So those are just a few of the ways that, we work with micro-credentials along with mentorship, along with teacher collaboration as a way to provide this ongoing development.
Kate, we did have one question, and sometimes teachers may be a little bit hesitant to earn a micro-credential because it seems like a lot of work, even though it is embedded right into the work that they're doing. But so, and since you've been working with these, the teachers who are engaged in the Modern Classrooms project, thinking about the artifacts that they submit to demonstrate competency, can you elaborate on what you hear back from those teachers? How is their own learning being impacted by the work that they do to earn those micro-credentials?
I like that question. I think we always hear that our teachers appreciate the space to reflect, the space to really start connecting the dots of how specific shifts in instruction have impacted them and their teaching practice, but also have impacted student learning. So I think that opportunity to reflect is invaluable. I think that it's also fun for teachers. We usually kind of receive a comment about, well, this was one of the first instructional videos I made, and this was one I made a month later, and it's, wow, I can't believe my first videos. I can't believe how much more comfortable I've gotten. It used to take me an hour to record a video, and I would, have to I would restart it 4 times. And now I just do it one take and it's done in 7 minutes. So it's fun to see, I think, their comfort level with the tech change. And it's something that's maybe really scary after they just leave the virtual mentorship program. But, by the time that they're applying for that micro-credential, we can see, but more importantly, they can see their growth in that area. Yeah. And I would actually love, it's a good segue to talk about, I reached out to some of our educators so you can hear from them in their own words. So I'm first going to introduce you to Taryn, who went through our professional development. Let's see, Taryn would have been last summer, and I want to make sure that, sorry about this, I just want to make sure that the right video is pulled up. And I'll introduce you to Taryn first, and then you'll hear from April and Liz.
The Modern Classroom Virtual Mentorship Program has not only provided me with one of the most valuable professional development experiences that I've ever had as a teacher, but it has also given me the opportunity to showcase my learning via the Digital Promise Micro-Credential. And then moving forward with my own Modern Classrooms journey, I have been honored to take part as a mentor myself. So I have gotten to see this program as both a mentee and a mentor. And so I can say without a doubt that this is a wonderful program with so much value.
That's a particular moment of pride for me because Taryn was one of my mentees. So it's fun to hear from her. So just very quickly, Taryn, talks about how it's been really valuable in her class. Just want to share out some data from our teachers. We partner with Johns Hopkins University every year, and we study our teachers as well as control teachers in their same school buildings. I highlighted 2 of my favorite data points that talk about how our teachers are feeling their efficacy is growing, particularly around students who have missed class. We've brought that up a few times now, but I think it's really important, particularly when we're talking about students, again, from high poverty districts or even from a rural background. So we see here 100% of the Modern Classroom surveyed teachers surveyed say they can easily help students who have missed class catch up, as opposed to 11% of traditional educators, simply because the system isn't built for that. We also see our educators overwhelmingly say that they are able to work closely with each of their students during class. This is April. April is a math teacher who has actually been teaching remote for all of this year. And will likely be continuing remote teaching at the very least into next school year.
Hi, my name is April Williamson. I did the Modern Classroom Virtual Mentorship Program about a year ago, and I've been implementing the model in my classroom this school year. It has been a really great professional development for me. And I think my favorite thing about it is that it has allowed me to actually differentiate my instruction in a meaningful way. Prior to doing the program, I really questioned how to actually serve my students as individuals given their differing needs. But the Digital Promise Micro-Credential provided me with a model and a set of tools that I was able to start using immediately to meet those goals. And as a result, both I and my students seem to be a lot happier, less stressed out, and more fulfilled in the classroom.
So to April's point about students, I thought this might be a nice time to highlight some of the data that we have, not only on teachers, but students. So, our teachers, definitely, we love and appreciate the responses we hear from them. They talk about really feeling like their instruction is data-driven every day. It's not just work samples we grab, take to a faculty, that we did 2 weeks ago. They're an outdated snapshot at this point. It was nice to examine them, but I'm not quite sure how I can use this to inform my instruction tomorrow. Rather, we're making decisions every day based on that student data. And this is a very, very proud point for me. Our teachers talk about how this makes teaching more sustainable. They feel like they can stay in the profession longer. They're feeling more effective. But to April's points about her students, we do see data indicating that our students themselves say they are becoming more self-aware, more self-directed. So those 21st century skills that we want to be boosting. It wasn't April's students, actually another student, much younger student. April teaches high school, but one of our teachers, Susan, who teaches third grade, in the words of one of her third graders, I think said it best to this data point. In this classroom, everyone gets what they need. And I think that's third grade speak for differentiation. You know, everyone is appropriately challenged. And then again, students also see and are internalizing that their progress is contingent on mastery, not just completion. And then finally, switching it up, going much younger than high school, this is Liz. And she teaches at, she's a kindergarten teacher. And when they were remote this school year, I had the privilege of visiting Liz's Zoom kindergarten class. And if you haven't gone to a Zoom kindergarten class, I guarantee you it's something to see. You're going to leave tired. I don't know how she does it every day, but I'm really happy to introduce you to Liz here.
Hi there. My name is Liz Rosenberg. I teach kindergarten at Creative Minds Public Charter School in Washington, D.C. I'm also a Distinguished Modern Classrooms educator and also a mentor. I'm here to attest to the incredible growth that I have made because of the opportunity I had to continue my own professional development through the Modern Classrooms project. While teaching in the classroom certainly allows for ongoing growth, we know teachers can't be their best siloed alone in their classrooms. I received the Micro-Credential. I joined a community of like-minded, passionate, brilliant teachers and grew more in a year when I couldn't even be in the classroom with my students than I have in a really long time. And I only wish there were more programs out there like Modern Classrooms for me to find support as I seek to grow my practice and my career. So it's been a wonderful experience being part of the Modern Classrooms project community. And I encourage anyone interested to check it out because it's been really great.
Teachers are my favorite people. It's been really, really, really fun. I'd love to stop, just questions in general.
So Kate, we do have a question in the chat box, and let me get to it here. It is, what incentives do teachers have to participate in the mentorship program? Or do you know of any examples where they're being offered continuing education credits, increased wages, and also a little bit about recruitment of teachers? How do teachers come into Modern Classrooms?
That's a great question. I'm going to put a link in the chat that talks about our external, in addition to the, you can apply for the Digital Promise Micro-Credential. You can achieve continuing education units or degree credits. I'm just going to pull those up here. And I think that sorry about this. Now, so in terms of increased pay, that's always going to depend on the state a little bit to see if they offer, if they can consider this, X number of hours to push you up into a certain band. This link that I'm adding to the chat now, you can see here, these are the different opportunities that we offer. So there's the graduate credits that can go towards a graduate degree, which of course can then impact pay depending on the state or district. The CEUs, now that's through George Mason University, that can obviously go towards recertification efforts, multiple other benefits to educators, and then of course the Digital Promise Micro-Credential. So those are just a few of the incentives. I think that we're very lucky because a lot of the teachers we work with, like the teachers you saw, are just so hardworking, so dedicated, and they really, I think that our community, just knowing that they are with like-minded educators, that has provided, an area of, or a source of strength in itself. I think many of our teachers, sadly, you could see in the video, yes, I was very fortunate to teach at Eastern. There were several Modern Classrooms educators. I talked about, Bellwood Antis District in Pennsylvania. There are several, but we work with teachers all the time, who say, I'm the only one in my building who's interested in learning more. And this has provided me a community, an outlet. It's virtual, sure, but I have, whether it's my mentor or I have people in the Modern Classroom Facebook or Slack community that I can go to for resources. And I think I was lucky. I had some of my best friends in the building. I had lots of thought partners. I could walk down the hall, but I know not all educators have that. So I'm really proud that we've been able to be that community for some teachers.
So Kate, we have another question in the chat box, and it's from Nicholas. And you know how you only see certain faces on your screen in your gallery view? Well, Nick's been on mine the whole time, and he has been so engaged. So I'm going to ask Nick if he wants to ask his question directly, if he wants to unmute and ask.
Certainly. So yeah, thank you very much. I think this is absolutely amazing. And, there's a lot of work, of course, that it seems like there is in the beginning, especially for a beginning teacher, but it's kind of it's just an amazing way to just, like you said, replicate yourself, but then make your job so much easier and have just such an amazing way to really serve students in so many different ways. It just makes so much sense. With regards to administration, I mean, sometimes a provocative question goes to teacher evaluation. So have you learned anything, excuse me, about how these lessons, how this positively, negatively impacts teacher evaluations? And I guess the thing that spurred this on to me was, once you kind of make yourself a video, you're there forever. So can you pick that and say, hey, you're really not doing this, and here's my video evidence, instead of just having that principal administrator come in, for the general traditional, observe the lesson, write your review?
It's a really good question. So we have found that a couple, there's a couple things that we're learning about the evaluation process. One is that a lot of the educators and schools we work with, administrators are requesting guidance themselves on saying, like, how do I best evaluate this teacher? Not in a punitive way. Like, I want to be supportive, but I'm also a school leader and I'm spinning a lot of plates. So can you help me with what to look for? And the short answer is absolutely yes. We're having our first, we're calling it a rubric. I'd like to think of it more as a tool for reflection and goal setting, that to really facilitate conversations between administrators and individual teachers. We are working on that right now, and it's going to be launched in our virtual summer institute. We're having a session specifically for those who support Modern Classrooms teachers to come and learn about the rubric, as well as listen to a panel of it's a district superintendent, a school-based principal, and an instructional coach, who all work to support a number of Modern Classroom educators in their building, kind of talking about this piece of how best to support teachers, what to look for at certain parts of the year. So we're developing our own. Now, I think, in terms of, so with existing rubrics, we see like the Danielson framework very much influence a lot of teacher evaluation systems. Interestingly enough, we were born in DC public schools and Washington, DC public schools. And several years ago, Washington, DC public schools had a major rehaul of their system, particularly around teacher evaluation. There's been some scholarship coming from the University of Virginia's ed school specifically about the impact teacher evaluation system, whether this was good, whether this was bad. We all have our thoughts. I taught under it for 7 years. It was a very high stakes, high reward system where essentially This evaluation system ushered in merit-based pay, ushered in very large bonuses, very large yearly bonuses for teachers in high poverty schools, as well as gave service credits if you did well on these evaluations. Now, on the flip side of that, high risk, high reward, these evaluation systems brought in the end of tenure, and teachers could be let go at the end of the year based on the evaluation. So it was a very high stakes and rigorous evaluation system that we were born under. We found, and that was a framework that was based on Danielson, was what the creators of Impact used. We found that our modern classroom educators at various DC public schools, including some of the lowest performing high schools and middle schools, actually did better than their building-wide peers on the impact evaluation system. And again, that was kind of pre-existing. And I think that was, twofold. I think we got some, that's the credit of those teachers themselves, who had worked really hard. And I think it's also the idea that with this way of teaching, it rewards good planning. And so many of those rubrics really want to see communication of learning goals and, aligned lessons and units. So I think that those were some ways that our teachers were doing well in a very high stakes environment. If our specific rubric is something that would be, of interest to you in seeing, I'd be happy to connect over email about that, because I have a real heart for teachers. And I know that, I think we're always going to be on the side of dreaming, like, what if we could build teachers up and use any evaluation again as an opportunity to reflect and to identify goals, rather than to disempower or make someone feel small, which they can sadly do.
Certainly. And just a follow-up, if I may, with this, I mean, it seems like, there's the power in duplicating yourself, but what about the power of a platform that you can set this on, allow teachers to use, and, perhaps like just take standards. And as they're building these lessons, all of a sudden there's a crosswalk of standards that you could have and basically print out and say, hey, here's what we already covered. Is that the dreamer in me?
The possibilities. It'll be very interesting to see, where things go, and to see. I think, right now we're definitely focused on the professional development, working on individual teachers themselves and empowering the educators with the skills to build their own instructional videos. We shall see what the future brings. Yeah, I'm not sure. This shows I don't have the CEO hat of the Modern Classrooms project, and that's fine with me. Keep me in my teaching and learning lane, keep me working with teachers. That's where I'm at my happiest.
Kate, we have another question. And of course, we've discussed this a little bit, and we all know what kind of brought us together. We were doing the innovative strategies with the Learning Innovation Grants. We had the Micro-Credentials going on. So would you like to talk a little bit about that? Someone had asked how KVEC became involved and what made you think that we were a good fit?
Well, I'd actually be more interested in your side of the story of this meet cute, if you will. How did you find the Modern Classroom project?
Well, actually, Robert found it. Robert.
Okay. Well, all right. Guilty party here. So how this happened? I was on a webinar with Digital Promise, and your co-founder Kareem Farah was speaking. And as I'm listening, I'm getting excited, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lot of the work that's happening within our schools with innovation, with the work that staff here is doing with micro-credentialing to bring innovation and experiences to our teachers and our students. So as he was speaking, I sent him a private chat and said, we're doing a podcast, our digital action podcast we have. I said, we would like to get you on a podcast. So after we had a podcast with him, we got even more excited, and we said, we need to have another follow-up meeting. So from that point, we had that follow-up meeting, and the connection between the micro-credentials, the coaching, the mentoring, the reflective practices, the networking, the technology was such a perfect fit. I said, okay, I'm gonna throw Bern under the bus. And who's our innovation coordinator. I said, Bern, I'm stepping out of my role. Here's something we really need to work together. So, and that's how that came to be.
I knew that you'd been on a webinar about and heard Kareem Farah, who was also in the Edutopia video. He was the math teacher who you saw. I knew that you had heard Kareem on a webinar. I didn't realize there was the podcast component. So you may have just now inspired me to ask you on our podcast. Look what you did. You created more work for yourself.
He'll be happy to do that.
I think we can just echo just the sentiment of having very similar values of believing that teachers, when we invest in our teachers, when we empower our teachers with ongoing professional development, with opportunities for micro-credentials, with membership, with opportunities to be a part of a community, we can really, really help kids. And I think that what we love so much about working with KVAC is we respect your history and your knowledge of the educators. These communities and the schools. We could sit on calls and look at lists of, and we'll talk about it right now, kind of how we're working together right now. And when we were looking at the learning innovation grants come in, you knew the area and you knew the schools so well to say like, oh, it's really interesting that we have an application from this county or this district that I think we should talk to so-and-so. And just, there was a very community driven aspect of this. And that's what we, that's a dream for us to work with, because we can come in, we can talk about the professional development opportunities, but we don't know the communities the way that KVAC does. So it's been a wonderful just point of pride for us to partner with KVAC. And I kind of go through a little bit of what we're doing this, as soon as my screen wants to load, what we're doing this spring. Let's try this again. So we're partnering with KVAC essentially to train 40 educators in Eastern Kentucky through 40 scholarships to our virtual mentorship program, or our virtual summer institute rather. So we were just not surprised, after seeing the wonderful engagement and relationships that KVAC has with the area schools. We were just so humbled to be receiving all these applications for the Learning Innovation Grant that you all put together, and really honored to be a part of it. So this summer, these 40 educators from Eastern Kentucky will be working one-on-one with our expert mentors in the Modern Classroom's virtual mentorship program. So, that does cost money because we pay the mentors. It's $495 an educator, and we pay our mentors a pretty competitive rate because teachers are not volunteers. They are professionals and they should be compensated. So, that's a reason that, unlike the free course, when you're getting that one-on-one coaching and very detailed feedback from a mentor, that's why the virtual mentorship costs money. And so through this grant, 40 educators in Eastern Kentucky will be able to participate. Because it's summer and we just have a bit more flexibility, anyone doing the virtual mentorship in the summer will actually take place in something we call Virtual Summer Institute. So we're able to do more live presentations. So we have big presentations on blended, self-paced, and mastery-based instruction. But in addition to that, we have 20 optional presentations ranging from project-based learning to trauma-informed teaching to manageable mastery-based grading practices that educators can choose to sign up for in the last 2 weeks of their summer institute. They'll be supported daily, again, because it's summer, we're able to just do that with daily Zoom office hours. One of our mentors will staff office hours every day. And we have our private discussion board through Slack available to them too. And then finally, through the KVAC Learning Innovation Grant, these 40 teachers will receive a technology package that will really help them build their own modern classroom, and specifically instructional videos. So that includes premium subscription to some of our favorite ed or video building and video enhancement programs, as well as an iPad and stylus, which we found to be, not completely necessary, but really, really nice as teachers are building their own instructional videos. It's possible, of course, to do them without it, but that technology package just further equips these teachers to succeed on day one. Yeah. So my email is right here. I would love, I know a couple of us, we've kind of exchanged some messages in the chat, and I'm just going to take quick screenshots of that so I have those. But I'd love to answer any additional questions about the instructional model or about the professional development, or or the great work our teachers are doing.
So, Kate, as we let other people put in their questions, there's a question also around cost, about cost for the micro-credential only versus enrolling in the mentorship program. And I don't know if you want to address that or connect by email around that, or how you want to approach that question.
Yep. No, that's a great question. The micro-credential is absolutely free. Through Digital Promise, you can apply for free. The free online class we offer, again, by nature and by name, free. The virtual mentorship program does cost money. And that mostly is because, again, we're paying the expert teacher mentor. And again, it's really exciting now we're at that step where we see people like Taryn, she was my mentee, and now she is going to be working to empower several teachers this summer into the fall and next school year. So the mentorship program does cost $495 an educator. We see various ways, honestly, that educators are covering that. We've seen CARES Act funding that schools and districts have used. Also, sometimes if need be, PTA funds, or even sometimes teachers unions and individual districts provide, X amount of money for professional development per educator.
Thank you, Kate. And I'm just going to tag on to that as we still wait to see if other folks have questions. But KVAC also has micro-credentials that are currently all being offered for free on our platform. And one of the partnerships that we have utilized to develop those micro-credentials, and we've mentioned the serving the rural students of poverty, is Dr. Bowling and Bernadette both are national trainers for the Ruby Payne Bridges Out of Poverty program. And they have worked to help. We've collaborated as an agency and with them to develop, we have 3 so far, but continuing to develop a stack of micro-credentials around teaching rural students of poverty. And one of the micro-credentials that we have is understanding types of poverty. And that is not just restricted to the students that we serve in Eastern Kentucky. That's about all students of poverty, whether they be urban, whether they be rural, whether it, be even, looking at some issues related to situational poverty that we are experiencing now due to the pandemic. So, we're really lucky that we've been able to leverage partnerships and be able to offer those micro-credentials for free as folks are designing systems of professional learning to directly address personalized professional learning needs of educators. So it's interesting just to kind of see those opportunities that are there for districts and schools to embed these micro-credentials within their professional learning systems, or educators themselves, maybe like Nicole, who says, "Ooh, I need that. That meets a learning need that I have," and then be able to seek that out individually.
Yeah. I think that it's so heartening. I think when we get the opportunity to connect with other educators who really have a heart for our vulnerable students who, whether you talked about, if situational poverty brought on by COVID-19, or this is something a family's been, struggling with for a long time. That's certainly where we were forged, where our teaching experiences were. And I think that, we're living in a very interesting moment. I think as teachers are preparing to, the American teacher through masks, through screens, they have done it all this year to try to serve kids. And I think next year, we'll be walking into even greater diversity in academic needs, in social emotional needs that have been brought on through all of this. So I really respect the work that KVEC does, and
that respect is reciprocal. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn this back over to Robert because he's got a few things to add before we lose folks.
Yeah. Well, Kate, first of all, I want to say thank you. And it's very obvious why we chose to work with Modern Classroom Project and the innovation and the partnerships and how important those partnerships are. Because when you look at systems approach, often we get questions, are you saying micro-credentials is the way to go? We're saying no, micro-credentials are a component within a larger system. So all the things that you've mentioned, all the things that we've mentioned within our system are the way that makes a complete package as you move towards teacher growth and ultimately student growth. So again, Kate, thank you for your time. I have dropped some emails in there from our KVEC staff, Jennifer's, mine, Bernadette's, and Desi's. If you have questions for any of us about some of the work around micro-credentials or innovation, those are there. I do encourage you to, the link will be coming out this afternoon for next week's session. I think we have a couple of our Arkansas folks on here with us today, but we are again focusing on that partnership. And though some of the folks at Arkansas Department of Education have been involved in the micro-credentials through, I believe they were working through a Bloomboard site. However, they were looking at how to create multi-agency micro-credentials and develop them in-house. So they're going to be working on a journey working on a journey with us on creating their own micro-credential that will spread across, and I believe there are 7 folks on the panel, multiple agencies, multiple contacts from reading, science, math, career and technical education. So that we'll be talking about that journey and how micro-credential development and competency-based learning fits into a larger system at their State Department. So exciting about next Thursday. Again, that link will be coming out again today. And if there are any final comments or questions from anyone that's still with us today or here on this at KVEC.
I'd just like to say that we knew from the beginning it was just a wonderful relationship with Modern Classroom, and I appreciate Kate, and thanks to everyone that was here.
Okay. Thank you, Kate, and we hope to see you next week. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye, all.
Bye. See you next Thursday.